Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today's topic of discussion is education. And we're going to be talking about the education that starts at home. And I want to talk about the education around accountability. And I am someone who believes that we all have the opportunity to grow, and growth comes with accountability, taking accountability for our choices and taking ownership of the decisions that we make and the consequences that those decisions come with. And so I am someone who is a firm believer that we all have our fair share of consequences that are a byproduct of the choices that we make. And it's not equally distributed. It's not that everyone is going to deal with the consequences all the same way. But I am someone who is a firm believer that you should never expect someone else to absorb the consequences of your actions. It wasn't a choice or decision that they made. Why should they take on the consequence? And so this is something that is a core value of mine. I am a huge believer that consequences come with growth. It gives you the opportunity to see things differently, to do things differently the next time. And if you're constantly avoiding consequence and you're trying to offload consequence by changing the story, by adjusting the facts, then you're also limiting your own personal potential for growth. You're never going to cultivate the foresight to do things differently if you don't absorb the consequences that come with the decisions that you make, and if you don't take ownership, essentially. And so I have a huge social justice barometer, and I think that this was activated when I was very young. I grew up with two siblings, and we were all within 3 years of one another. We were born very close together. And one of the ways that we were dealt with consequences, like if it was the case that my parents didn't know what was going on or who did it, then we would all get the same punishment, right? And sometimes what they would do is they would line us up in a row. We would have our hands out, and they would ask us, like, are you ready for your siblings to take the consequence of your actions? And just so you know, like, this is just the round one. If we still don't get a confession, the punishments are going to increase. And so because of that, we always had to grapple with this choice of owning our decisions, because it wasn't just going to be us who was going to deal with the consequences of those choices. If we decided to keep it to ourselves, that consequence was going to be spread out evenly, which was unfair, right? And the point of it was creating that conscientiousness, that consciousness of the fact that, like, are you comfortable with making the choice of allowing other people to deal with the consequences of your actions because you're choosing to stay silent? That was how I was raised. And so I always got a confession. Sometimes we had like the first round go before someone would confess, but it developed this moral compass in me, very strongly in me, because I am someone who does not like to get punished. Most people don't really think about it when they're in the moment. I am someone who is a very conscientious doer. Like, whenever I do anything, I'm always thinking about like the future version of myself, whether the future version of myself is going to appreciate my choices, whether the future version of myself will be punished for these choices. Like, this was my train of thought even as a child. So it was very rare that I was getting punished for the things that my older sister or my younger brother would get punished for, because I had the foresight to maybe not do those specific things, or to do things in a way where I was not going to get caught to do those specific things. But I wasn't ever going to put myself in a position where I was going to get punished unnecessarily. I did not like to be punished. And so that was a motivator in and of itself to avoid the types of interactions with my parents and with authority figures that were going to get me punished. And so as an adult, I carry the same philosophy. I am someone who's a big believer that we own the consequences of our choices, and it is absolutely inappropriate to expect someone else to bear the consequences of your choices. If you are not comfortable with the outcome of your decisions and of your choices, then maybe you shouldn't be making those decisions and those choices. And if you don't have the ability to take a step back and to have that level of awareness that maybe now that you find yourself in a situation where you're seeing the consequence of your action and you don't want to atone for it, it should challenge you to first take accountability for it, not try to offer that accountability on somebody else, and then also like do differently, right? And we can do differently. And I fundamentally believe that everyone has the ability to do differently, but you're not going to be motivated to do differently if all you're motivated to do is offload responsibility. And I am not the person who will ever allow myself to take the brunt of a consequence that was not formed from my decision. It is not going to happen. And it's not that I'm unkind, it's because I recognize that I am here on this earth, on this journey, ready and willing to take accountability for my choices, to take the consequences that come with my choices. And that in and of itself is enough, right? It's enough because that comes with pain, that comes with suffering, that comes with discomfort. No one likes likes consequences, right? Like no one likes to disappoint other people. No one likes to disappoint ourselves. It's not fun. And so I'm still going to do it if it involves my locus of control, decisions that I have made that have impacted people, places, and things around me. I am not the kind of person who would ever think to offload my consequence to someone else. I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that it's right. I don't think that that promotes growth for myself. And it's almost, at this stage in my life, it's almost inconceivable that someone be so afraid of consequence, but so eager to make a decision that once the consequence of that decision comes up, they're trying to now offload and shift blame and create a narrative that is alternate to the reality. And so I am someone who is always going to stand by the true narrative. And it's not because I'm trying to be malicious or that I'm trying to be mean. It's because I am someone who is comfortable making decisions and taking accountability for my decisions, which means that if I am interacting with someone who's also making decisions, I am expecting them to take accountability and take ownership for their decisions. There's not going to be wiggle room around it. There's not going to be a version of reality where I absorb the weight of those consequences. I don't think that that's a good way to be a peer in our social settings. I don't think that's a way to parent if it is a case that we're parents. I don't think it's a way to be a professional in a professional setting. I don't think that there is any version of reality where you avoiding consequence is going to support the greater whole. And I remember growing up, I would watch these movies where, there was a snapshot decision and someone was going to take the fault for someone else, and it would shift the course of those people's lives, right? And so for me, it's like 2 lives wasted, right? Because the consequence was not meant for the person who didn't make the choice. And yet that person is bearing the weight of that consequence, lost so much of their life because they bore the weight of a consequence that was a byproduct of the choice that they didn't make. And for me, that is such a waste. Like that is not something I would ever do to myself. I would hope that my children would never allow that to happen to them. I would never be on a platform telling you or giving you any form of rationalization for taking the consequences away from someone else's choices. I think we don't enable each other to grow. We don't empower each other if we're constantly taking the blame for things we haven't done. That is scapegoat behavior. And it's one thing if someone tries to make you the scapegoat and you didn't give them permission to, and you're standing your ground and you're holding to your version of reality, which is the version of reality. A completely different thing if you sign up to be the scapegoat. Absolutely not. That is completely not the way that you create friendships. It's not the way that you maintain friendships. It's not what should ever be an expectation of you, is to take the consequence or alleviate the weight of the consequences of someone else's actions. Now you can try to gauge like if the consequence itself is too severe. Like sometimes I remember growing up and I would think about the consequences that I saw were ready to get doled out to my siblings. And sometimes I would step in because I would feel like this consequence does not justify the action. I don't believe in the consequence. And I am someone who's such a big advocate for justice and all of the ways that it translates, even if I am witnessing the consequences as they are happening. Like if I don't think that the consequence itself justifies the action, then I'm going to speak up. But I'm not going to say, well, hey, like let me suffer the consequence with that person. I mean, that's just not the way that I am built, right? I'm not built that way. And that's just because I don't feel that I'm supporting my own growth by taking accountability for things that I haven't done. I don't think that I am acting from a place of integrity by saying that I've done something that I haven't done. And I can advocate for the person, right? I can advocate for the why. I can advocate for the how, for the when, for the what. I can explain some of the context behind why that decision was made, because sometimes like we have to recognize that the choices we make, they're with blind spots. We make the best choice with the information that we have at that point in time. And sometimes we are provided with the responsibility and the privilege of making choices that would have serious impacts. And if down the road a blind spot comes up and now you realize that there could be serious consequences for these choices, I think the best way that you manage that is by speaking openly and honestly about the fact that that was a blind spot when you made the choice. The way that you take ownership of that is not to try to offload that consequence by making it someone else's choice when it was not their choice. And so that is something that I expect in every setting that I'm in. I am someone who expects it of myself. I expect myself to take accountability for the choices and the decisions that I make. I expect it from others as well. And I want to come here and talk a little bit about it because it's not about finger pointing. It's not about being holier than thou. It's about recognizing that we're all on a growth journey, and that growth is going to involve taking accountability and bearing the consequences of our choices. And there's no trying to wiggle out of making the types of decisions that make waves, but then not dealing with the consequences for it. I think that that's very cowardly behavior if you are the kind of person who expects someone else to take the consequences for your decisions. And I think that's also incredibly unfair to expect that. It's not something that you should ever hope someone would do for you. And if you're someone who's on the receiving end of that request and you saying no is being seen as you being unkind or not being nice, you're respecting your own integrity. Why would you take the image? Why would you take on the perception that you're the kind of person who made a choice that you know you didn't make? And even worse, that you know you wouldn't have made. Like, why would you take that on when that's not your weight to bear? I don't get it. And so that's my fundamental belief. And I see sometimes people make the most radical and sometimes irresponsible choices, and they have this sort of attitude like they do whatever they want. But like for me, it's like you do whatever you want, but then one day you're gonna have to pay the piper and you're gonna have to pay the consequences of your choices. It's going to add up to you. And there was this one saying that I grew up with, is like, those who live by the sword die by the sword. And I think that it can be adapted based on your generation, but it's true. Like the things that you allow yourself to do and the choices that you allow yourself to make, like those choices will either serve you or they will not serve you. So you need to think about like your way of being and your way of interacting with others. And ultimately, is that going to serve you in the long run? Is your future self going to thank you for the ways that you've shown up, the ways that you interact with other people, for the ways that you have decided to navigate specific arenas? Or is your future self going to regret or going to be bearing the consequences of the choices and dealing with the riffraff that comes with those choices? So I think we all need to recognize that accountability and consequence gives us the opportunity to develop foresight. And you're not going to develop foresight without the pain of consequence, right? Like you're not going to think more deeply about the quality of your choices, about the impact that your choices have, about the future ripples that that choice can create if you're not forced to think a few steps ahead. And for those of us who are a little bit more impulsive, I'm someone who likes to think things out and think things through, so that when I do move, it's with decisiveness, because I've really thought through the situation a lot. But if you're a little bit more impulsive, you just kind of like to go with things, go with the flow, recognize that that in and of itself comes with its own fair share of consequences, right? But in all cases, like I think the fundamental message here is we all are going to deal with the consequences of our choices in every facet of our lives. And that's enough. That's enough weight for all of us to carry. Taking on the consequence for someone else and their actions, you're not serving them, you're not serving yourself. I think you can support them in the journey that comes with dealing with the consequences of their actions, like support the healing that comes with it, the growth that comes with it, to put their weight on some of the discomfort that might come with it. But you don't take that burden off of them. Like that's their burden that came with their choice. And that's pretty much the hill that I stand on about the topic. And so I wanted to come on here because I don't think that this is education that all of us have. I think some of us like to scapegoat ourselves. We think that it's honorable to scapegoat ourselves and to take the consequences away from someone else. And I do not think that. I do not think that it is honorable to take accountability for things that you did not do. I do not think that it's the high road or being the bigger person to bear the weight of choices you did not make. I am not that person who would ever expect that from anyone else. I would never ask that of anyone else. And so I would never tolerate someone asking that of me. And that's not being mean. That's me holding true to my integrity and recognizing that, like, I'm happy to take accountability for what I have done, what I have chosen to do, what I have decided. I am absolutely not in any version of reality going to take someone else's consequence and the weight of their consequences from them. I think take the opportunity to grow. And all of us have different life experiences, right? Like it could be that growing up, consequences were very severe, like they were very harsh for you. And maybe that's why you fear consequences now, because you fear the same harshness and severity. And we can't control the severity of the consequences that we are faced with, right? But great responsibility comes with sometimes like big consequences. And if you're willing and ready to take the responsibility, then you also need to be ready and willing to take the consequence. Offloading consequence while gunning for more responsibility, I think, is a very disproportionate way of engaging with the world around you. And at some point, something is going to need to collapse for it to find its way to equilibrium. I think life is about equilibrium, right? And if we make big choices and not deal with the consequences, at some point, we're going to deal with a consequence that really is a reflection of all the consequences that we were able to bypass and to offload it into other people. And so I am not someone who believes that it is appropriate to ask someone to take the consequences of your choices. I am not someone who would ever ask someone to take the consequences of my choices. I don't need anyone to take the consequences consequences away from the choices that I've chosen to make. And I am absolutely the kind of person who will stand true to my truth when I know that that's how things went. I am not going to take the consequences or plead to something or speak to something that I know that I didn't do, irrespective of how it's being painted all around me. If I know I didn't do it, then I'm not going to take responsibility for it, point blank. It's just not going to happen. And so that's a value deep within me. It touches on my sense of justice. And I think justice is around consequences, choices, and consequences. I don't think there is any justice when we pay the consequences for choices that we did not make. So don't put yourself in that position. Don't allow anyone else to put you in that position. And know that that is deep education that starts at home. Anyone who has taught you that it is okay for you to bear the weight of their consequences, and they continue to make choices that are destructive or that are harmful to some extent or that are very risky, but then want you to deal with the consequences of that, those people are not positioning themselves for growth. And they're also putting you in danger, right? And there's no person's life that is more valuable than someone else. And someone who wants you to bear the weight of their consequences is secretly signaling or is quietly signaling that they think that their life has more value than yours. And that's why they shouldn't be bearing the weight or the consequences of their choices. And that sense of entitlement is not something that I would ever nourish or groom or allow to flourish in a relationship that I find myself in. And whether, again, that's social, whether that's personal, and whatever facet, like anyone who operates from a place of considering their own value as greater than that of anyone else is just not the kind of person that I feel would be healthy to build close relationships with. In any case, that's the conversation I want to have. It's the conversation that starts at home. I would love to hear from you, like when you have dealt with a situation where someone else is trying to offload consequence on you and how you dealt with it and how you maintain your integrity. And remember, maintaining your integrity is not just about telling the truth. It's about being open and honest and maintaining it's about being open and honest about what you know you did and didn't do, and not allowing someone to paint a narrative that puts them in a better light than what their choices reflect, right? And I think that it's very important that we're always trying to find alignment with the image that we put forward and the choices that we're making behind closed doors. And if someone sees a gap and a disparity in that and they're trying to maintain that gap and disparity, I don't think we're helping their growth and their ability to be better by enabling that of them. Like, we need to hold each other accountable for our choices, and how that's done is through consequence. And anyways, that was it, but definitely not all. Now, before letting you go, we do provide workshops that give you the opportunity to cultivate this level of mastery so that you can walk in alignment in life. And I think that alignment gives us the ability to find more meaning, find more fulfillment in life, and align ourselves to the things that really energize us and bring us joy, deep-seated joy. So if you're curious to learn what kinds of life skills, soft skills that are transferable in all aspects of your life that will enable that, then definitely go to our website and check those programs out, because we don't think that leadership starts too young. We think that leadership is a competency that we can start at a very young age. And I think those who have a strong sense of individuality are better equipped than those who do not. And so we want to give children especially the chance to cultivate that sense of individuality. And so we have built our thesis on 4 core concepts, and it's cultivating a sense of self-concept, autonomy, self-efficacy, and compassion as the building blocks of having a strong sense of individuality, of having the ability to think critically, and to cultivate that intellectual curiosity. So something for you, something for everyone in your family. Thank you so much again for tuning in. If you're still here, please do like, please do follow, share this video. Every interaction definitely helps to get that message out there and have these thoughtful conversations moving forward. Thanks so much again, and I'll see you all very soon.